Never loan your car to anyone to whom you've given birth. The only reason I would take up jogging is so I could hear heavy breathing again. When Erma Bombeck died in 1996, we lost one of the world's greatest humorists. Life magazine called her the Socrates of the ironing board. Columnist Ellen Goodman said that Erma Bombeck didn't write to end up at the Pulitzer Prize Committee's door. Her words won her a more coveted prize. She said, Irma's words won her the permanent place of honor in American life, the refrigerator door. Irma Louise Feist was born on February 21, 1927 in Bellbrook, Ohio. Her father, Cassius Edwin Feist, was 33 when Irma was born, and her mother, also named Irma, was 16. The Feists lived in a small house on Hedges Street in Dayton. Once during an interview, Irma talked about how her mother had been raised in an orphanage and didn't have much of an education. She said she'd only been to the 4th grade. When her mother heard about it, she snapped back with, "You've screwed things up as usual. You said I had a 4th grade education? That's not true. Your father had a 4th grade education. I had a 6th grade education." Irma's mother was a classic stage mother. She was always pushing little Irma into performing. Little Irma was a pretty good little blues singer, and she could tap dance. She danced for years on a radio show called The Kitty Review. But the spotlight was not something little Irma sought. What she wanted was to become a writer. She kept those thoughts to herself. She was afraid that her mother would push her, or worse, talk her out of it. Even today, writers draw inspiration from Irma's admission, "It takes a lot of courage to show your dreams to someone else." When Irma was 9, her father died suddenly from an undiagnosed kidney disease. Later, Irma would pass this disease along to her 2 sons, Matt and Andy, who have both undergone successful kidney transplants. Irma and her mother lost everything after Cassius died. Since her mother was an orphan, they had no family other than Cassius's parents. So the 2 Irmas moved into a much smaller and very crowded house in the Haymarket district of Dayton around 5th and Wayne, now the Oregon district. Irma's mother went to work in the Leland Electric Company's factory and then to General Motors. Irma was the only child in her class whose mother worked outside the home. Little Irma didn't really mind, though. She loved the diversity of the neighborhood, the various cultures coming together, a mix of languages she'd never heard. For entertainment, she and her best friend used to go to all the church services. Irma said, "We used to go to the synagogue on Saturdays, Mass on Sundays, and I was a Protestant." When Irma was 11, her mother, aged 27, met and married a man who was just 12 years older than little Irma was. Really, he seemed more like a big brother to her than a stepfather, and Irma resented the place this man had taken in her mother's affections. Years later, Irma and her stepfather, Tom Harris, would become quite close, but at the start, things were contentious, to say the least. Irma entered the 8th grade at Emerson Junior High and became immersed in her schoolwork, especially her English classes. She got a spot on the school paper, The Owl, and wrote humorous columns about kids in the in crowd, the cafeteria food, and certain teachers. Most of it was funny and fairly harmless, but sometimes she went too far and found herself in the principal's office trying to talk herself out of a suspension. At 15, Irma entered Patterson Vocational High School and set her mind on becoming a serious writer. Kids at Patterson worked for 2 weeks and went to class for 2 weeks. Irma became the features editor for her journalism class. Then she went to see the managing editor of the Dayton Herald to get a job as a reporter. When he explained that he could only hire a full-timer, she said if she could find another girl to work part-time, he'd have himself one full-timer. The editor couldn't argue with that, so he hired Erma, and she was a spunky new copy girl. While Erma was at the Herald, she fell hard for a copy boy named Bill Bombeck. Bill worked for the Dayton Journal, the morning newspaper, and he went to Chaminade High School in the afternoon. The two went out a few times, but Erma was so shy, and Bill tended to date around a bit. When he graduated, he joined the Army and shipped off to Korea. He may have thought that was the end of it. Erma graduated and wanted to go immediately to college, but her parents wouldn't pay for it. Remember, her father had had just a 4th grade education, and her mother had a 6th grade education. Plus, they thought it was a waste of money. So, an irritated Erma worked full-time at the newspaper until she could earn enough money to pay her tuition herself. Erma was relegated to the obituary department, where her humor and witty prose weren't very helpful. She wasn't much for fact-checking, and her mother said that about the only thing she could ever get right was to have the people die in alphabetical order. Erma finally saved enough money for school, and she headed off to Ohio University. And to put it plainly, she flunked out. She did poorly in her favorite classes, and her advisor told her to forget about a career in writing. Dejected, she came home at the end of the semester. She enrolled at the University of Dayton and went to work at Reich's department store, editing their employee newsletter, the RK. And at UD, with the benefit of the psychology and philosophy classes, her writing took on a more circumspect tone. UD was small, and Erma felt more comfortable and secure there. Both her writing and her grades improved, especially under the guidance of brother Tom Price, who asked her to write for the university's magazine, The Exponent, and he gave her the words that would encourage and inspire her for the rest of her life. You can write. Things were looking up in every way for Erma. Bill Bombeck had returned from Korea and was also at UD. They got reacquainted and began to date seriously. She converted to Catholicism, and she and Bill were married the following August after Erma graduated in 1949. She went back to work at the newspaper until she and Bill could start a family. She was assigned to the women's section, and her column was called Operation Dust Rag, making fun of cleaning the house, cooking, and doing the laundry. She told her college friend, Shirley Fleischman, "Why clean your oven all the time? As long as you can still get a cupcake in there without touching the sides, you're in good shape." At the time, housework was viewed as almost a sacred act, so the editors balked when Erma joked, "Housework, if you do it right, will kill you." But her readers loved it. After 4 years of trying to have a baby, Bill and Erma adopted blue-eyed baby Betsy from Catholic Social Services, and despite her doctor's warnings that she would never conceive, Erma gave birth to Andy and then Matthew, all within a 4-year time span. In 1955, the Bombecks settled at 162 Cushwa Drive in Centerville, a busy little neighborhood near Centerville High School where Bill was teaching. Erma loved her role as wife and mother of 3 little ones, and everyone had a hectic life. Erma kept her sense of humor about it all, though. She said, "We used to say, if the Virgin Mary had lived on our block, we would have said, of course she had time to go to the dentist. She only had Jesus." One of her neighbors was Phil Donahue, a local news reporter. Phil was Oprah before Oprah was Oprah. A creatively frustrated Erma knew she wanted to do something more with her writing. She said, "I was 37, too old for a paper route, too young for Social Security, and too tired for an affair." In 1964, Erma began writing her column Zone 59 for the Kettering Oakwood Times, but barely 2 years went by before her column caught the eye of her former employer, the Journal Herald. The paper hired her back and gave her a raise to $45 a week, an increase of 400% from her $3 a week at the Times. In less than a month, Erma's column at Wits End was picked up by the Newsday Syndicate. An excited Erma told her family at dinner that night that she was going to be a newspaper star. No one stopped eating. No one said anything for a long time until a disgruntled Betsy said, "Does this mean you're not going to be able to take me to Scouts on Tuesday?" Years later, son Andy said that when they were little, "We had no idea what Mom did for a living. We told everyone she was a syndicated communist." Within 5 years, At Wits End went from a distribution of 38 newspapers to 500. Her first book made Erma Bombeck a household name. She switched syndicates to Universal Press and reached 700 newspapers. For the next 6 years, she wrote for Good Housekeeping, Red Book, Reader's Digest, and the Ladies' Home Journal. The Bombecks also moved to a farmhouse in Bellbrook around this time. Erma went on to write 15 more books, and one of the most popular was The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank. When her agent told her she could get 6 figures for it, she snapped, "Don't tell my husband." On a speaking tour to Arizona, Erma fell in love with the desert, the sunsets over the beautiful McDowell Mountains, and the people. She and Bill moved their family to Paradise Valley near Phoenix in the early 1970s. Erma managed to stay relevant in her writing by telling a generation of women, "Seize the moment. Think of all those women on the Titanic who waved off the dessert cart." In the late 1970s, she worked for 2 years trying to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. She said, "I would classify myself as a nonviolent mother of 3 unplanned children. I've been married to the same man for 31 years with whom I've never had a meaningful conversation in my entire life. I iron by demand, have a daughter who is 26 years old and has no curiosity as to how to turn on a stove. And I have 2 sons who make Cain and Abel look like Donnie and Marie Osmond." Speaking to a group in Utah, Erma said, "We've got to get sex out of the gutter and back into the Constitution where it belongs. The ERA cause, equality of rights under the law, may be the most misunderstood word since one size fits all." The amendment's failure was one of her greatest disappointments. Erma was featured for 11 years on the TV show Good Morning America. She developed The Grass is Always Greener into a movie starring Charles Grodin and Carol Burnett, and then wrote a sitcom called Maggie. In 1985, the Tournament of Roses Association chose the theme A Celebration of Laughter and asked Erma to be the Grand Marshal. A delighted Erma said that along with dust collecting, parades had always been a favorite hobby of hers. What she really wanted, though, she said, was to be named Queen of the Rose Bowl. But, she said, "I just couldn't hold my breath to hold my stomach in for 2 hours." Erma decided to retire from Good Morning America and was looking for a project with a bit more meaning for her life. She was reluctant to accept an invitation to visit Camp Sunrise, a camp for children with cancer, because she thought it would be hard and sad. But she did it. For 3 years, she spent time with the children and their families, and she said that talking with those kids had taught her an important lesson. She said, "If you can't handle optimism, don't hang around with kids with cancer." Her book, I Want to Grow Hair, I Want to Grow Up, I Want to Go to Boise, was named for a little boy's 3 wishes and earned a lot of money for the American Cancer Society. After the book's publication, Bill and Irma took time off to travel. Their trips inspired her book, When You Look Like Your Passport Photo, It's Time to Go Home. Its message, besides Irma's funny stories about world travel, was to slow down and enjoy the ride. In April 1992, Irma was diagnosed with breast cancer. Then her kidneys began to fail. While she waited for a transplant, she was confined to home while administering dialysis 4 times a day. She did not ask for, nor did she receive, any special treatment because of her celebrity status or her role as the spokesperson for the Arizona Kidney Foundation. In 1996, she was flown to San Francisco and underwent a successful kidney transplant. But complications arose. She developed pneumonia, jaundice, and 3 weeks later, it was clear she would not improve. During the night of April 21st, having said goodbye to her family, Erma Bombeck died, leaving many to mourn her passing. In remarks after her death, Bill Bombeck recalled Irma's philosophy. "When I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have a single bit of talent left and could say, 'I used everything you gave me.'" Erma Bombeck is buried here in Dayton at Woodland Cemetery beside a massive 29,000-pound Phoenix desert boulder. Her husband, Bill Bombeck, passed in January 2018, and they are now reunited after 46 years of marriage. Per Irma's wishes, her epitaph reads, "I told you I was sick." I'd like to leave you with one of my favorite Erma Bombeck columns. It's called When God Created Mothers. When the good Lord was creating mothers, he was into his 6th day of overtime when an angel appeared and said, "You're doing a lot of fiddling around on this one." And the Lord said, "Have you read the specifications on this order? She has to be completely washable, but not plastic. Have 180 movable parts, all replaceable. Run on black coffee and leftovers. Have a lap that disappears when she stands up. A kiss that can cure anything from a broken leg to a disappointed love affair. And 6 pairs of hands." The angel shook her head slowly and said, "6 pairs of hands? No way. It's not the hands that are causing me problems," said the Lord. "It's the 3 pairs of eyes that mothers have to have." "That's on the standard model?" asked the angel. The Lord nodded. "1 pair that sees through closed doors when she asks, 'What are you kids doing in there?' when she already knows. Another here in the back of her head that sees what she shouldn't, but what she has to know. And of course, the ones right here in front that can look at a child when he goofs up and says, 'I understand and I love you,' without so much as uttering a word." "Lord," said the angel, touching his sleeve, "go to bed. Tomorrow." "I can't," said the Lord. "I'm so close to creating something so close to myself. Already I have one who heals herself when she is sick, can feed a family of 6 on 1 pound of hamburger, and can get a 9-year-old to stand under the shower." The angel circled the model of the mother very slowly. "It's too soft," she sighed, "But she's tough," said the Lord excitedly. "You cannot imagine what this mother can do or endure." "Can it think?" "Not only can it think, but it can reason and compromise," said the Creator. Finally, the angel bent over and she ran her finger across the cheek. "There's a leak," she pronounced. "I told you, you're trying to push too much into this model." "It's not a leak," said the Lord. "It's a tear." "What's it for?" "It's for joy, sadness, disappointment, pain, loneliness, and pride." "You are a genius," said the angel. "I didn't put it there," said the Lord.